I'm Yvonne Forster, and I'm Mary Rain, as was, Mary Rain's daughter, who was the youngest of the 9 children who lived here with their father and mother. And prior to that, their father, great-grandfather, Robert and Isabella, lived here from the 1870s. I visited the farm a lot, probably every other weekend during the summer, and Christmases were spent here, and mainly every 2 weeks in the summer holidays for at least a decade. It was just an automatic place to go to have a fun and adventure without all the trappings of the life that I had at home, which was a bathroom and flush toilets and running water and electricity. So it was a lovely place to go with lovely people and just different things happening every day from my normal life. So it was an idyllic childhood holiday experience. I can never forget it. We used to, the first thing in the morning, go the pasture with a horse, taking the milk up onto the fell for collection, and then it had, come back. I remember picking mushrooms. That's definitely something that happened at the end of the school holiday period when the mushrooms came, and then you perhaps got bacon and mushrooms for breakfast if there were mushrooms as you came back from taking the milk. Collecting the eggs on the way back, crawling under the whin bushes, gorse bushes, whin bushes, and being sent in to find the eggs that the hens had lain in these awful places. Helping Auntie to bake, prepare fruit from the garden, all the different fruits that they did for bottling and preserving and making jam. Collecting the water, not carrying it, but putting it into the pails from the spring that was along the field, that direction, from the house. It was a good several hundred yards to the edge of a field where the spring came out, and so I used to fill up these pails, and then somebody would collect them later and carry them for me because they were too big and too heavy for me. It was too far. Feed the pet lambs. There were always a couple of pet lambs to feed, and that was great fun. And then hay time was just another absolutely idyllic time, because apart from having lots of people in the farm to visit, to help, we always had teas, hay time teas, and all these delicious things. My favourite was granny loaf, but there was homemade cakes, lots and lots of cakes, and ham sandwiches, and tea for the men and women, but they were in these massive great enamel carrying whatever they were, but if there were any more children or me, it was homemade ginger beer, and that was just idyllic. Just sitting, I think there is a picture somewhere of my mum, my grandmother and myself having the tea underneath the haystack, because we'd been out there in the sun, because obviously it was always sunny when you were a child. It never was a bad day, but I do remember some lovely haymaking days. What else did we do? It was just so much, something different every minute of the day. But it was all work, it was not play. There was no play. And really, you couldn't play here. There was no flat land to play with a ball, so that was out of the question. You couldn't ride a bike because there was no flat place to ride. So you just really helped, did everything. It was just busy, and that's just what happened. Nobody ever sat down. I don't remember any of my uncles or aunts or anybody on a farm ever sitting down until something like the 9 o'clock news that used to be then. The radio, they'd put the radio on, somebody would lean back, put the radio on and listen to the news. And that was it, 9 o'clock, you sort of sat down, and it was just on the go the whole day, apart from meal times, obviously. Yeah, and the food, that was something else. That the food was amazing. What my aunt cooked and prepared and made, and her teas, her high teas, her afternoon teas were historic. Anybody who ever remembers coming to the farm would remark on the hospitality, but these teas, and she apologised if there was not something that wasn't homemade. And somebody once said, well, it was only the salt and the sugar and the cutlery, because even the tablecloth was homemade, and it was the cheese and the bread and the butter, and everything was just produced here from the garden. A really good garden. My great-grandfather who lived here had been a great gardener. He'd started the garden, and he was a flower judge at the local agricultural shows in the Dale. He used to have there's lots of things written about him that said he loved flower gardening, and he became a judge. So yeah, there was always plenty to eat, and plenty of food. So my mother, who obviously, and the family who lived through the Depression, it didn't really touch them in any way because they were self-sufficient. A very, very much lived home for all of those people for a long time, and everybody came back to it, and it's got the memories now, and upstairs particularly, that bedroom. Yeah. Oh, she absolutely adored this house. Spainsfield was very, 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 very precious to her. She has always said how she loved living here, and she was very proud when it was coming to Beamish. She just was so thrilled by the idea, and has just sadly missed out on the very last bit of being able to come, but yeah, it's absolutely amazing. She would be amazed because it's so very much like it was. My mum lived here through the 20s, 30s, and only left when she went. She got married in 1946. She left to get married, so she was here during the war. In the 30s, they had quite a busy business with egg production. They had, I've told the story, my mum was sent to a whist drive when she was about 14 or 16, and she really didn't know much about whist, but she won third prize, which was a cockerel. So her brother carried the cockerel home in a sack and decided, well, we've got a cockerel now, I'll get an incubator and start to hatch eggs. And that's what they did, and it took off massively into this big egg-producing business that involved taking them all to the station on a Friday evening, I think it was, and all the eggs, dozens and dozens of them, because we've got the books and the records of saying how much the eggs were sold at. And these dozens of eggs went to Newcastle and Sunderland, and the chickens, when they were time for the hens to be dispatched, went to the Jewish communities in Sunderland and Newcastle. So that was quite a big business from this little farm. And butter and eggs were sold in the villages down by the train stations, Stanhope and Frostley and Woolsingham, by my mum, carrying baskets of eggs and things all the way to the station. Can't imagine it, but yeah, that's what happened. In 2012, I got home after spending Christmas, New Year in Scotland, and my phone was, the messages were just absolutely full of had I seen press release about Spainsfield goes to Beamish. That was the heading, because I have the articles. I'd kept I was given the articles because I wasn't there at the time, and so I thought, well, this must be true, but I couldn't imagine it for one moment, having seen the state of the house. Having said that, I rang Beamish and eventually spoke to somebody, and I said, well, as far as I know, we were the last people to live in that house, that family, and I do have lots of things and lots of a paper archive, as well as lots of objects, and my mum's a walking history of the place because she lived there. So that was it. We got the visits from then on about what it was like, what we had. We kept dispatching up as we could find them, because when I looked around my home and when I looked around my mum's home, it was just everywhere around. We'd forgotten that these things had come from Spainsfield and just had never been thrown away. It is the classic family that never threw anything away. So my aunt hadn't thrown it away when she passed on. My mum got it, and when we looked at it, we just thought, well, it's got to go to Beamish, where it belongs. So it's been a decade now of just sending things and seeing people. And my mum, prior to, I think for the last perhaps 10 years of her life, her sight was suffering. She had macular degeneration. So that concentrated her mind really on thinking of the past and the stories. Once she couldn't see television, she really got to grips with the memories. So I used to write them down as she spoke, and because it was more natural than doing a recording. So that's how I got the memories now, because we talked about them for the last 10 years of her life. And I was fascinated by them anyway, regardless of them coming to Beamish. I just thought they were so interesting. She represented a bygone age, and that was just a pleasure to do it. Yeah. So it's just been a fascinating revelation for me as well to find it all, and then to have everything that's there meaningful now, because it's going to help to educate and have people appreciate the history of not just the farmhouse, but farming, the life, the work, and Weardale. And that's been a precious place for all of the family. I'm very, very proud of their origins. Oh, that was an amazing day. Yeah, I did as well, I can say. And there was my cousin Brian here, who was the last baby to be born here. He didn't live here. He lived on the farm next door, but I think his mother wasn't very well, and grandmother would have her here when she was having this baby. But yeah, we clambered aboard this wonderful old car with a chauffeur, which I'm told was the Emperor of Japan's car, which I didn't know until Lisa told me that. It was very spectacular, and we came along to the farm, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. That hay was being made in the old-fashioned way just down in the next field, and the horse was raking it. And then we laid the stones in these hard hats and high vis, and she was carried like in a sedan chair, which was really funny. And and meeting Paul and the stonemasons and Reg, that was the highlight. And then going all the way back through the crowds. I think it was August in Beamish at the time, and it was full of people. And I hadn't been to Beamish since it was started, so there was nothing like it when I saw what it was like. And all these people were looking at us to think, I wonder who they are, because we rumbled all the way to the bank and had afternoon tea, and it was amazing, yeah. And the other wonderful thing that my mum had, she got a telegram from the Queen on her 100th birthday, but she also got the birthday card from Beamish with everybody holding up the letter, which I have to this day on my fireplace, because I just think it's so good. The whole thing's been a memorable journey, and for her, she was, it's pretty special. I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it, but it is so special for me, but it was even more special for her because she'd actually been part of it and had, So what can I say? It's just the icing on the cake as far as Spainsfield's concerned. Just carries on, doesn't it? Just incredible thing to be part of. But I have been thinking about it recently, the idea that there's generations of people have lived here already, because obviously it's 5 centuries old now, and somebody has, well, shepherds mostly, but it's just, and knowing now more about my family who've lived here because I've looked at it, and it's just incredible. It's now going to become somewhere that people, well, not just experience walking around and looking at things, but the idea that it's educational value, really, that appeals to me because I was a teacher. So it's just a lovely thought to think that people will really, really understand. Because I do believe if you don't look at the past and learn about history, then you don't value the present, and or certainly perhaps don't even appreciate the present, and it helps you to understand perhaps the future as well. Looking back helps you to look forward.